What do you get when a London-raised American South African and a New York-raised Moroccan meet on the interwebs and become instant soul sisters? One of them, an Ayurvedic practitioner and transformation coach, and the other, a Conspire Breath-work Coach and Reiki master teacher. Both obsessed with wellness, family, entrepreneurship, relationships, and the magic of human expansion and growth. You get a whole convo. We truly believe that with an open heart, focused mind, and energy receptive to the possibilities, your wellness journey can guide you to a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. Welcome to our podcast. We're Ella and Iman, and we are so happy you're here. Come vibe with us as we explore the wholeness of being through the lens of wellness. Welcome back to another episode of A Whole Convo with Ella and Iman. Do we want to say this is part 2, Iman?
We could say it's part 2. I think this is definitely the Ella episode for sure. So part 2, aka the Ella episode, we're diving deep into Ella's world this time. If you heard our last episode, we got a little deep with me. I think there was so much shared in that episode. The versatility of Iman.
Yes, and I think it was a perfect pockets of different aspects of you, of who you are, of how you came to be. So it was perfection.
I think sharing parts of like our deepest self, because there was some personal things and vulnerable things I shared in that episode, I think always brings us closer to ourselves again, right? It's such a reminder of like, wow, this is us. Like, this is who we are. This is the essence of being a soul on this planet. So that episode was great. Thank you for igniting that. I love it. I'm super excited to ignite so much of what we're going to learn about you today, Ella. So first thing I want to ask you, first and foremost,
yes,
is, okay, I'm clearly an American in a New Yorker accent. Ella, you have this accent I'm obsessed with because I'm obsessed with the English accent. So how did you get to the UK? What's your story? What's your childhood like? What brought you to the UK, and where did you start off in life?
How did I get to the Shires? I just want to go back to what you said about connecting us to the soul of who we are. It's so important because how often do we get to talk about ourselves in this way, with having someone be curious about who we are and where we come from? So thank you for holding this space for me, Iman. Okay. So I ended up in the Shires. I'm currently in the Shires.
So wait a minute.
Yeah.
Shires. Okay.
The Shires.
I wouldn't know what that is if I didn't come visit you there. So please explain to our listeners what the Shires are.
The Shires are the county areas of England. So everybody knows London. They know the big cities: London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, these places, Liverpool. These are cities where lots of things are happening, lots of life, concentration of people. And then the Shires is everything outside of that big city life experience.
So like, would you say the countryside?
Countryside, smaller towns, villages. So it's that away from the concentration of those large cities. And I live in a home county, and the home counties are the shires that surround London. So they all touch London, whether it's northeast, south, or west. So I live northeast of London in Hertfordshire.
I had the pleasure of visiting.
Yeah, Hertfordshire was coming to the Shires was quite a trip for me because I grew up in London. Let's go back into time.
Take us back.
So I came to the UK when I was 3. So like you, I wasn't
the same time my mom moved to Germany from Morocco.
Look at that. Another parallel that we share. So I moved here when I was 3 from Nigeria, which, aside from being a meeting point, which I'll get into in a moment, has nothing else really to do with
there's no Nigerians in my family. There's no connections that to that country, other than that's where my mum and dad met.
And
Other
you were
than
born
that,
there?
yes.
Wow.
So it's a big part of my story. My mum grew up New York. I mentioned it when we are talking about that connection that we have.
Richmond Hill, she's a queen
Richmond
gal.
Hill, she's a Queen's gal. She went to Queen's University before she went to Stanford, not University, Queen's College
Queen's
before she went to,
College. I was
yeah.
gonna say, you mean Queen's College?
I mean Queen's College. I went there when they had their like, was it 40th reunion or something like crazy like that? I went there
Stop.
with my mum. Crazy. She went to Queen's, then she went off to Stanford. That's a whole convo. But she grew up in New York to descendants of German and Swedish ancestry, right?
There's those Germans
So
again.
there's that German connection. Her mother's family was German, her father's family was Swedish, and they moved to America in like, the 1817 whatever things, when that mass migration was happening, right?
Yes.
And she went to Nigeria as part of the Peace Corps. So it was like a big rebellious act for her to
Wow.
leave New York and go and volunteer. I don't think it's volunteer, but go and be an aid worker in Nigeria. So she left and was teaching at a secondary school in Nigeria. And my dad, who was born and grew up in South Africa. So he was born before apartheid was a thing. And then apartheid became the national government and way things were done. And at that time, he was at Fort Hare University. His contemporaries, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, all of these people, big in well-known names in the liberation struggle. And he was very much a part of that. And
Wow.
my dad, what can I say about my dad? He's quite stubborn and bloody minded. And he decided this apartheid thing was not for him.
That's
And
right.
he resisted and became a political exile from South Africa.
Whoa.
So, where Nelson Mandela was
Love him
political,
already.
yes, like there's so many things about my dad. Where he was, when Nelson Mandela became a political prisoner, my dad was resisting from the outside and causing all kinds of havoc and stuff when he left South Africa and ended up via several different places in Nigeria. And
Wow,
that's where my
crazy.
parents met. So
What?
can you imagine that? She's come from New York via all these places to even get to America. And then he's come
And
from
ends
this,
up in Nigeria of all
ends up in
places.
Nigeria, of all places. And he was there as a political exile from South Africa. And that's how I ended up being born in Nigeria. And then we moved here. Now, there's bits of this I'm not clear about, but my dad was also involved with the British government, and I don't know to what extent and why, and I don't know, and I can't ask him.
Top secret
Yeah,
stuff.
and I can't ask him anymore. And yeah, that's how we came here when I was 3. So that's how I ended up here via lots of different places. And then I came to the Shires actually it's 20 years ago this year, which just blows my mind that it's been that long, after a spell in South Africa with
Mm.
my girls. So yeah, that's where I hail from, young
Love
lady.
it. Love it. Well, that's pretty remarkable that your mom even decided to make such a bold move like that led her to Nigeria. And your dad, who's now passed, God rest his soul. I know I've seen pictures and heard so much about him, just sounds like an outstanding, fascinating, wonderful man.
He really
And
was.
so thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure we'll learn more about him throughout the episode and podcast and all the good stuff. But since we're talking a little bit about South Africa, that's where your dad is from. Last episode, we ended with a juicy we said, so we're starting this little cute tradition. A whole convo podcast is starting this cute tradition where we celebrate monthly. We get a little nostalgic. We take a little trip in our past and we pick one thing that we're really maybe forgot about that we want to celebrate this month. And so we were talking about my ungraduating to graduate to change my GPA in college. That's what we're celebrating. Ella shared something mind blowing, and she's celebrating her escape to South Africa within a week's time notice with a baby,
Yeah,
both girls.
both
So
girls.
okay, let's please do us the honor and share this epic story.
So this celebration for me is a reminder of a rite of passage in my life. And because when we mentioned the idea of the celebration, when you brought it forward, it was such a great idea. It reminds me of resilience and things that I've gone through and challenges that I've overcome. And I didn't have to think that hard in order to make this happen. So I had given birth 8 weeks before to my youngest daughter, Nyla.
Nai.
My little Nai. And at the time, I had an injunction, a non-molestation order out against my girl's dad because he was violent. That's a whole convo. And yeah, he was violent, he was problematic, and all of the things. So I had gone to the courts to try and protect myself and my girls from him being around and approaching us and generally just causing huge issues and problems and bringing violence to our door. And he had breached this non-molestation order twice.
That's like a protection order, right? That's like a restraining order in the States.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I had called the police on both occasions to have the terms of the order enforced against him. And both
Because you
times
went against it twice already at this point.
Yeah, and it had a power of arrest attached to it. So if he breached the terms of it, the police were supposed to arrest him. And both times they didn't. Both times he talked his way out of being arrested.
The Shire's police.
No, this is the Metropolitan Police. Oh, there's a whole thing I could get into.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to go into that. And bearing in mind, this was 21 years ago. And I would hope I could say that the provision for women and violence against women has changed. I can't speak to that, but that's a whole conversation, right? So but the second time he breached and I'd called the police and they did not enforce the power of arrest, I didn't feel safe. I had taken the measures that I thought were there to protect me and to protect my family so that we could feel safe. And it just wasn't working. And I remember at that time feeling so lost. I was so frightened. I was so scared because holding a baby and trying to protect a young child from the threat of violence from a man, and I just felt like helpless. I didn't have enough arms. I didn't have enough capability to protect us. So it was the second time that he breached it. And I was like, I have to get out of here. I have to keep my children safe. What am I going to do? And the furthest place away that I could think of going to was to South Africa. It's like, he's not going to just turn up there. He's not going to. And even if he did, he wouldn't know where to look. And, like this was just my thought process. I've got to get out of here. So it was like it was literally a week to the day that he breached it the second time. And I called the police and nothing happened. That both Nyla turned 8 weeks on that day that we were flying. And that we dipped, trying to get out. And it was just like one of those things.
Packed up and went on a flight. How did you even take anything? Did you take stuff?
Oh, it took as much as I could carry. Took as much as I could carry, and just figured it out when we got there. It was just like, I need to leave. I need to get out of here. This is the only thing I can do to protect my family. At that point, that was the only thing that I could think of to do to protect my family. So it was, just thinking about it, just saying, it sounds like idiotic. It sounds crazy. It sounds like such a ridiculous move to make, but that's how desperate I felt to protect my girls and how desperate I was to create a feeling of safety,
Safety.
as much as I thought I could at that time. And it's such a celebration because it doesn't make sense on paper.
Yes.
It's quite a daunting thing to actually undertake, but we did it and we are here to tell the tale because of it. So
Totally. That is a huge celebration. And I honor you and celebrate you and admire you. That's huge. And I know so many people go through that traumatic experience of having domestic violence and having a partner that they don't feel safe around. I mean, I can't even what a horrifying thing to even live through. And you did it with two little baby girls.
I did. And do you know, Iman saying that it's usually around the time that a woman is pregnant that the violence increases and those instances just go through the roof. And that has been
And
my
that's what happened
experience.
to you.
It has been, I mean, the violence was constant. And then the pregnancies, both pregnancies just saw it just go through the roof. And yeah, violence against women is a whole convo. There's so much in it. There's so much, misunderstanding. But I this is something that I feel happy to have a space to be able to talk about it in some ways as we go through the podcast, as we go through episodes, because it's been something that's on my heart. It's been in my mind forever. So thank you for
I can only
hearing me.
imagine. I can only imagine. Okay, so I feel like that there's so much to unpack there with that story that we can either, depending on how you feel and how comfortable and, respecting obviously your privacy as well, we can either go into where my mind goes is like, I just want to know so much more
Hmm.
because it takes so much strength and courage and resilience and understanding where like how long did that violence last? You know how like I spoke about that whole coming back home moment? Like I wonder, obviously they are nowhere near related or anything. But what is the common denominator in all things in life is like when a human being, when an individual, when a spirit, when a soul makes a decision, that second, that moment, that feeling.
Mm.
When was that for you? Obviously, you said like when he breached, but I mean, like, what was the journey, if you're comfortable to share with now, that led you to stay for the amount of time that you did, despite the violence? And then what was that feeling for you, that coming home back to self, making that bold, crazy, brave decision?
Okay, so there's so much in that because
I know.
the coming home to me thing, I feel like this is a journey that we go on throughout our lives. We have so many moments marked with those feeling of I need to come back home to me. And like you say, they can look quite small, or small's not the right word, but quite simple, or they can
Right,
be,
right.
more complex.
Yeah.
So you asked me what caused me to stay. The first thing is I was so young. So I met the girl's dad at school. We were 11 when
Oh, wow.
so do you know what he
Yes,
did?
I do
He
remember
just
you saying that.
yeah. So he just
You were babies.
absolutely but he used to follow me. He used to follow me around the school. And like as I say that now and I think about it,
Oh
it's
my God, I know. I was literally thinking, I'm thinking what you're gonna say. Wasn't that like a red flag?
like
He
it
was
had
stalking you
all
at 11.
yes, it had all the hallmarks of totally unacceptable behavior. But he just used to get on my nerves, and I just used to be just like, go away, leave me alone, go away, leave me alone.
Oh my God.
So the the trajectory is we always were around each other in friendships and things like that because one of my good friends at the time was really good friends with him. And at school, a lot
Same
of things,
circles.
yeah, things overlap. And our relationship was complicated by the fact that he saw me as his best friend
Mm.
and I saw him go through and experience violence from his dad. And
Wow.
one of the craziest memories I have is him turning up at my door. It was, at night time, and his face was covered in blood from an experience he'd gone through with his dad. So
Goodness.
part of the complication of our relationship was me understanding his experience and some of his trauma that he had gone through in his life. So in seeing that aspect to him, I don't know, I guess as a young person, I believed that he knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of that. And so I don't really want to get into it too much,
Yes,
but
of course.
from the perspective of we had such a long history together, a long time, and our lives were so intertwined in terms of friendship, in terms of shared experiences, just growing up and being in the same area. So many things overlapped, and then from there, what people don't understand is violence doesn't happen on day one. You don't get into a relationship with someone and then they start like knocking you about, beating you up, doing things to you. It's so insidious and it's so incremental, and it starts with very easy to dismiss slights of conversation, things where people are subtly putting you down and gaslighting and just slowly breaking away your confidence, slowly taking
Mhm.
away your support system, slowly removing all the things. You mentioned quite a lot about losing that sense of who you are, slowly eroding your understanding and your sense of who you are over a period of time. It doesn't go from 1 to 100 overnight,
Right.
right?
Right.
So this is over a period of years, and I would even include the time when we weren't actually together, just friendship, that the seeds of these changes and the seeds of this breakdown of who I was happened over time. And then the simplest thing, you have no financial independence.
Right.
You have no
It's
way of,
major.
you have no way of actually being able to leave the situation until you feel the confidence, or until things get to that critical mass. And that's what happened to me. But I had so many coming home to me moments during the period of that relationship that I wasn't able to honor because it wasn't possible. I didn't have the money, I didn't have the
Right.
resources, I didn't have the things that I needed to make it possible. And I spent many months walking around with passports thinking, is today the day that I'm going to leave? So it's not something that, it's not black and white. It's not oh yeah,
100%.
I wouldn't put up with that, I would just leave. Everyone thinks that.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. It is extremely, extremely vulnerable, personal, traumatizing. It's heartbreaking to hear because I love you so much, and I know other people have gone through similar things, and it's always heartbreaking to hear, right? But it is very, very intricate and
Mm,
more complex than people, especially if they haven't been in those circumstances, think. And so I think your perspective, your explanation, your own personal experience and story of it does help our listeners just understand, especially if they're maybe some are in a similar situation and they just want to find some solace. Of course, we want to be able to create the safe space and
mm,
support for people who may have questions about
yeah,
this, to be able to feel like they can seek guidance.
absolutely.
What would be something that you would share for someone to give them some light or some hope if someone's listening right now and they're experiencing something like this?
I would say, first of all, it's not you. That's the most important thing to remember, to underline. It's not you. You're not crazy. The things that you are being told about yourself, it's just not true. It's just not true, because part of the way that abusive framework sticks is because the person who is abusing you is constantly undermining you and constantly saying that you're demanding too much and constantly saying that you're the problem, it's not you.
Right.
100% it is not you. You do not deserve to be spoken down to. You do not deserve to be questioned about things that feel right and true for you. You do not deserve to want less than having respect, having less than having care, less than being treated as a human being, because so much of it is dehumanizing words, dehumanizing behavior, dehumanizing projection onto someone who's experiencing abuse from your abuser. So that's the first thing. And then I would say, look to your resources, look to the things that you have available to you that are close to you. And it's not even necessarily about having conversations with people around you, because for me that wasn't
Yeah.
always, that wasn't always a helpful suggestion or an
Sometimes it can
idea.
even be more problematic at times, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So look to your resources. There may be groups around you.
And
There may be,
professionals, right?
yeah, people that can support you.
Organizations.
So in the UK, we've got Women's Aid, we've got Refuge. There may be something more local to you, and you can access them on the internet. There are phone numbers that you can call. There are ways that you can communicate with these people, and sometimes it's not about you have to leave straight away, because if you don't have that strength, or you don't feel that you're ready, or you're concerned about what that can look like, reaching out to these organizations can help you understand some of the options that are available to you. And they have privacy screens, they have ways that they can hide numbers. So if you're concerned that you're going to be found out for seeking this information, there are ways that you can cover your tracks
Oh, wow, that's helpful.
whilst you're, finding out more and getting to that place where you feel ready to take the next step. And that's what I'd say to start with. And just remember, as cliche as it sounds, you're not alone. There are people out there who understand
Yes,
the things that you are
sure.
going through, that you have been through, the way that they affect you, and things don't have to stay this way.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely know that it's very important to just address these things, especially in such sensitive topics like this, and hearing from you and what you would suggest, and your guidance is just so beautiful, Ella. So thank you so much. I know that one time you told me a little bit of some of the details that you shared today. And I remember you mentioning something about how that kind of experience in your life and what you went through in that time and in that partnership is one of the things that led you to breath work, that led you to, one of, I would say, the greatest gifts that you have, if I may say so myself, just because I had the honor and pleasure to experience it once or twice with you, and it is absolute magic. So I'd love to hear, just to change the vibe a bit, but obviously kind of,
Yeah, because it's like a bit deep, wasn't it? It's like a bit oof.
it's deep, but it's also not something like, okay, great, thanks for sharing. On to the next thing. It's real. So,
And that was a great segue, by the way.
well, something a little bit more lighthearted, but rooted in, right? Rooted in the chaos, rooted in like the essence of the humanity of going through something that makes you feel like you're so done, you're broken. It's the end. It's like, you're too far deep in. It's
Mm,
too hard.
mm.
There's light, right? There's this thing,
Always,
there's breath, right? There's breath.
always.
So please share with me and the listeners your journey to breath work, exactly what that means, because I know now it's become this very general concept, breath work, and there's so many different modalities of breath work and all that. I want to know all the juicy details.
Okay, we're not going to go into all the juicy details because we don't have the time for that.
Okay,
We'll get
so
into
then
the
you know
most
what we're gonna
important
do?
ones.
We're gonna
Okay.
do another episode,
Yes. A whole convo on it.
a whole convo on it. Breathe like your life depended on it.
Yes, girl.
So listen into that one when it comes. But yes, quickly tell us, to wrap it up, like what brought you to breath?
The magic that is breath. So you made me think of this when we were talking with you about how your experience, like particularly you spoke about coming to therapy was a later on thing, a later on experience. And it's interesting because it reminded me that it's something that actually therapy has been very much a part of my life for a long time. In different episodes, in different periods, different stages of my life. And I remember the first, this is an aside, but it all connects. The first time I had an experience with a counselor, and it just sounds, oh my God, it sounds so ridiculous now that I think about it. No, because my mum's friend was a counselor, and she kind of forced me to have this counseling session.
I was already saying this is not going. I'm already not liking this.
But she,
Your mom's friend? Don't we need to be talking about your mom in therapy? Did she tell her everything you said?
no, but she was like, there was something wrong with me. So her friend
Oh,
needed to fix me
oh,
in
right,
this,
right.
like I was a
Such
problem.
a
She
huge
needed,
misconception, my
yeah,
goodness, when it comes to therapy. And
yeah.
he was
So
like, let's fix what's wrong.
exactly. So that was that was my introduction to it. And it was a theme that I visited in several points throughout my life. And I share this because it was always an interesting inquiry for me, understanding, looking at things, joining the dots about how experiences growing up in my childhood and in my past impacted my perception of the world, who I became, who I didn't
Right.
become, and how that showed up in my life in the current experience. So I'm going to park that to the side. Just know that information. And when it comes to breath work, this was something I grew up with. My dad was always, I
Mm,
could always hear him with
right.
his yoga breathing. So I make a distinction between conscious breathing and breath work. And for me, conscious breathing is anything that we do to alter the way that we are breathing to induce a specific result. So in that category, I put pranayama breathwork because it is all about consciously working with the life force to create outcomes, to support ourselves to get energy moving through our body in specific ways. My dad was always doing that. It was one of my earliest childhood memories. And I'm sure if you ask my girls, they will remember in the mornings when we were like staying with granddad or he was staying with us, we would just hear, particularly one Kriya from the skull shining breath, the Kapalabhati. And because it's so distinctive, it's like this.
Yes, I've heard that and seen that before.
And it was just like the soundtrack to the mornings when granddad was around,
Oh, I
when my dad
love
was
that
around. So it was
soundtrack to the what? Oh,
it's imprinted so deeply. So it was something I was always unconsciously exposed to. And my dad would
right.
bring me into let's do this. Can you do this with me? We're going to try this while alternate nostril breathing, all the things.
Yeah.
And so it was something I took for granted because it was there and it was always around. And then when I was pregnant with Nyla, my youngest, because it was a particularly tumultuous time in my life, I found my connection to conscious breathing again through my pregnancy yoga class. And it was a lifeline for me at that time.
Mm,
Because, and I know this looking back, I was barely breathing. I was constantly in survival mode, being in that relationship, in that space, around that violence, around all of the effects on my nervous system is total dysregulation.
right.
So being able to breathe changed everything at that time. And being able to feel that aliveness, that peace, that calm,
Mm,
that centeredness that was offered to me through that conscious breathing, just absolutely amazing. And I took that with me in pieces, but you know how things sometimes happen. You lose touch with things. Life was there's so many other things going on with life.
of course. You had to still survive.
Had to survive, had to hot foot it to South Africa, girl. You know, there were things happening. So I touched in on it here and there, and it was a part of my yoga practice that I touched in on here and there as well. And I always felt the difference. Always, always, always the calmness, the centeredness, the groundedness, the connection back to me.
So
And
powerful.
that was here and there. And like I say, I love conscious breathing because it offers that. And yet it wasn't something that felt like a sustained difference, a continual difference. It worked at the time I was doing it and for a little while afterwards, but it didn't have that longevity for me until I found breath work. And this is the distinction: breath work for integration, breath work that actually cleans up our unconscious mind, breath work that actually changes our emotional state, that has an impact on the dysfunction of our breathing. And we'll get into that in a whole convo about the breath work, and makes a sustained difference. So for me, it was the understanding of the therapy. This is where this comes back in. I could understand so many things about myself. I could see things clearly. I could intellectualize things, but it
Right.
wasn't changing the way I was feeling. I would still get triggered. I'd still get activated by certain dynamics, by certain conversations. You know, there was a lot of PTSD for me about this violence in this relationship that was very much present in my life. And understanding it, great, wonderful, helpful, changed some things, but there were layers that were imprinted that the breath was able to reach and touch and move for me. And that to me was the life-changing aspect. It made
Mm,
so much sense. It'd been a part of my life forever. It was in my DNA somehow.
mm.
It was just so real, so true, and it changed things so significantly, so quickly for me that that was like, oh, I just love it. Obsessed, 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 obsessed. And I need to, like, just calm myself down because I know
I
it's gonna go for forever.
But I cannot wait till that episode because your obsession lights me up. And that's the beauty of life, right? When we find something that lights us up, it worked for us, right? We have experienced it from such a personal
Mm,
level that we saw the change, we saw the transformation, we feel the bliss and the peace. It would be crazy to not continue, to not share it. And I feel like, and I love that about us because as two women from one from North Africa, one from
one
South,
from top, one from the bottom.
right? New York, UK, like as two women of color at that in the health and wellness space, having reached the level in our life, in our career, in our profession, with all the other things we've done in our life, and that's a whole other conversation, that we're here so obsessed,
Mm,
so obsessed with what we do in our work and
hmm.
impacting our clients and our, our community and the people that are on the path of elevating their health, their life, their wellness, their relationships, their own essence of living and existing on this planet just lights me up. And I'm so grateful for that. I know we're wrapping it up. So I want to finish off with one interesting, possibly weird thing about you that not a lot of people know about. What can you give us?
Interesting, possibly weird.
I want a little weird. I want a little random. I want a little, would have never thought that about you, Ella.
I mean, I feel like Iman, that's you've stumped me because I
Ooh.
can't possibly think what that would be because there's just I feel like people know so much about me. There's nothing that's really kind of
No, 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 no. Cop out. Nope.
yeah, no, but
You
I
think
just
people know so much
like weird,
about me.
like what? Like
Our
weird.
listeners want to know something weird, or maybe someone said, actually, let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
You have two daughters that I've
Hmm.
had the pleasure of meeting, both of them.
Yeah.
What is something that one of your daughters or both of your daughters tell you all the time about yourself?
But I would. because they're constantly saying I'm weird, and I'm like, that's just not
Exactly.
weird.
That you're okay. What? Okay, give us one
Okay,
thing
so
we both agree on about you.
so like it'll be things like, okay, so I'll just start talking in an accent, and then I won't speak to them. I'm like, no, leave me alone. And and it will just go on and on. They're just like, Mom, stop. And I'm like, no, I don't know who your mother is. It's me.
And you'd continue that, and they'd want to have serious, normal conversations with you.
Yeah, and they're just like, stop it.
I'm sure it drives them crazy. What's the longest that has gone on for? Like minutes? Like hours?
Most recently, I think it was when Nyla was on a reading week. She came back in like
What's
February.
a reading week?
So from university, so she's at uni, and you can get like a period of time where you don't have lectures, you don't have like seminars, and it's time to read and
nice.
catch up.
A day.
Yeah, so she tends to come home for reading week. She doesn't,
of course,
studying at home.
She's gonna read at home.
Right, exactly. And it was during her last reading week in February, and I started, and it must have been going on for about half an hour to an hour, and then she just joined in.
She went back to uni. Oh, she joined in.
No, it got to the point where she was just like, okay, if you can't beat them, join them. And she just
love her. Oh my God, this is so amazing. Thank you for sharing so much of you with us today. That was, I mean, not that it's possible to love you anymore, but I love you so much more. You're such a light, and I'm so excited that we get to share our experiences and our stories and our lives with others and our listeners. So thank you so much for everyone who's listened in.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here, guys. And it is one of those beautiful things to be able to share from who we are, and the perfection of having hard experiences in what that can offer to someone listening in, someone watching who may feel despairing, disconnected, lost, that there are examples of people who come out the other side, and it's a beautiful thing.
So close us out, Queen.
Thank you so much for being here for this whole convo with Ella and Iman. Until next time, we've got some absolute juice coming for you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
That is a wrap on this week's convo. We had a blast talking to you.
Thank you for sharing your time, hearts, and minds with us.
We hope this episode left you thinking, feeling, and maybe even breathing a little deeper. If it moved something in you, please share it, text it to a friend, or just sit with it.
Remember, the power of change can start with the simplest convo.
And if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our show so you never miss a moment of the magic. And if you're curious about any of our services and offerings, check out the show notes for all the links and goodies. We're so grateful you're on this journey with us. Until next time,
stay rooted, stay whole.